to welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I'm gonna do another character discussion video for you guys. Um, so I've already kind of talked about this character before, but it was more of a sillier video. And I wanted to do a more serious character discussion of this person. So I'm talking about Mr. Edward Fairfax Rochester from Jane Eyre. I did one of those videos back in the like probably 2017 or something, where I talked about where I was doing just these fun little venues of is this character dateable, and trying to list the pros and cons of the person. And I wanted to, but like I said, I wanted to do a more serious character discussion of them. And I might be repeating myself, and saying a lot of the same things I said in that video. I mean, I hope I'll be adding some different thoughts on. I don't know that, but I'm still gonna do this anyway because I want to. So, I have just something just popped up on my screen. Those pop-up windows are really annoying. But anyway, so Rochester is Jane Eyre's love interest, in her book. And he's a little bit better as far as, than Heathcliff, who is a very messed up human being. He's a character that has a lot of issues, and he was a character that was abused, and and this recently has come up again because the new adaptation just came out, and there's a lot of controversy about the adaptation. Like, half the fans think it's great and enjoyed it, and the other half are very critical of it and hate it and think, and there's the whole thing about, like, the whole confusion with, is it or is it not a love story? Half the audience says, in a way, it is a love story. It is a love story, and the other half says it's not, and it's just one big mess. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion. Interesting debate. But we're not talking about that. I just mentioned Heathcliff because, of course, Emily Bronte is the sister of Charlotte Bronte, who wrote Jane Eyre. And they kind of write similar books, but Charlotte's books so far seem a little less dark. They're still, I think they're still very dark stories, but they're a little, like, that one, like, I think that story, Wuthering Heights, is a little more passion and all the, like, and dark and tragic. Well, Jane Eyre is a little more, like, it has its own tragedy of, Jane's life being miserable. But there's more hope in Jane Eyre, I think. And the same with Villette, although Villette, if I remember correctly, does not end. It has a bittersweet kind of ending. I'm gonna start reading Shirley again soon, but I don't know when. But anyway, so Rochester is a very complicated character. He's not, like I said, he's not as toxic. I mean, he is toxic. He has his own toxicity, but I think Heathcliff is a lot worse. And it probably doesn't help that Heathcliff got abused. I mean, that's part of why he's a lot worse than Rochester, I think. So, Rochester was someone who, we don't know a lot of his background on his family, and we're only focused on his adult life, his present day issues, and we do get his past, but, not his childhood. He was someone who, in his younger years, he was a typical gentleman of the time, like, very, flirted with women and had a lot of fun, maybe a little too much fun, and he got roped into, he was in, I do not know what, I don't remember where, was it, I don't know which part of the world, I don't remember, I mean, it's been a while since I've read Jane, I mean, I recently watched one of the adaptations, but I didn't hear, I wasn't hear where he went, but he does go to this other part of the world where I want where he means he's roped into a marriage with this woman who turns out to have some mental health issues. And it puts him in this position of where he is like, he does not realize until he's stuck in the marriage that his wife has these issues and is unstable, mentally unstable. And he thinks that keeping her in the attic of his home and having a nurse take care of her is, I mean, it's better than putting her in those asylums, which, yeah, I can see the case for that, because the way it was a lot worse back then. The mental health hospitals were a lot worse. But at the same time, and then, but it's so sad that the best option for her was to live in a home with a man who didn't love her, tied to him. The two of them were tied to each other and legally were forced to be married, and the only companion she has is a nurse, and she's slowly losing her mind. She's losing her mind because she's the only, and she's isolated in this attic. And Rochester doesn't tell anyone about it. No one except, I don't even think Miss Fairfax, the housekeeper, knew about it. Yeah, and I don't think, or I think he's the butler or something, but they didn't know anything about it. And he lies to Jane when he doesn't tell Jane when she arrives. I mean, and Adele, of course, doesn't know either. But she's a kid. So, of course, it probably was good for him not to tell Adele, because she's just this kid. And her mom died, so she's being raised by this man who thinks that you're not even my kid. I mean, he does kind of the right thing and decides, even though he thinks this kid is not his, he reluctantly takes this kid on and raises her. But he's kind of a bully to her, because she reminds him of her mother, who was this flirtatious woman. And, like, we don't know a lot about her. We just get our only knowledge about this woman, about Adele's mom, is from Rochester himself. She's very, like I said, she's very flirtatious. He is kind of bitter towards her. And you find out that he caught her with one of her lovers when he was coming to visit her and make a visit, come surprise her with the visit. And then he hides and he sees her with one of her lovers, and he becomes bitter towards her and hurt, which can't really blame him, when you catch your partner with someone else, like, that kind of sucks. But because of that, Adele reminds him of her, and so he's kind of a jerk to Adele, and she's just a kid. She doesn't know any better. She was just raised by her mom, and probably her mom, taught her these things, and she didn't know any better. So I don't like how he treats Adele. I never really liked that part. He's just so, like, rude to her and passive aggressive, and I mean, he gets very short with her. And I don't, that's definitely not not a great character trait to have, because she's just a kid. She's not her mother. But Rochester, and he also gets very, like, even when he first meets Jane, he is very, like, she is walking on the lane, walking by, minding her own business, having, just delivered a letter or something. She's gone to the post office. She returns home, and yeah, it does startle his horse, and he falls off and injures himself. I get that, and it's gonna hurt. But like Jane was startled by it all, was scared, and like, and I don't think it, he shouldn't, like, he was rude to her when they first met, and he's very rude to her when they have their conversations when he gets to the house, and she's reintroduced to him and realized that he's the guy that she met on the road, and he's all like, you're like saying it's your fault, you stole my horse, you're a witch and everything, and luckily for him, Jane is like, is ready to, like, she bites back. She fights back. She's like, I'm not taking your crap. I'm not taking your. I mean, I'll be respectful because you're my boss, but I'm also not gonna let you bully me and make me feel small. So they don't make a great first impression with each other, which is really funny. And and so they kind of grow to love each other. They get to know each other, which I do appreciate. That they, that's what's great about this relationship, is that they love each other, the flaws and all, and they stay loyal to each other. And yeah, maybe Jane could have done better, but as I've said when I've talked about Jane Eyre, is that what other options has Jane got except for St. John, which, like, he didn't even want. Jane wanted to marry for love, and she was still, was in love with Rochester. She just couldn't be with him because if she finds out about his little lie that he has a wife in the attic, that is mentally unstable, and so the only other man that shows someone interested in her is the guy who's like, I'm not gonna marry for love. I'm marrying to be sensible and practical. I need a good wife, and so he wants Jane to come because he thinks she would be a good wife, not because he's in love with her, but because she's a good wife, and he's gonna take her. They're gonna travel to another, which, yeah, Jane, was good with doing charitable work and helping people, and but she hasn't experienced a lot of love in her life, and is gonna marry for love, and then he wants to, he's like, no, you're gonna learn this language. He forces it, and the way she talks about that experience in the book is she is miserable and is frustrated and feels like she's being forced to do something that she does not want to learn this language, and he's trying to force himself. And when she starts having these moments of, she thinks she hears Rochester calling for her, he, basically just calls her crazy, and she needs to, she's delusional. She needs to wake up and face reality, and it's not that her other option is not that great either. But anyway, back to Rochester. So, but he is a very passionate man. He showers her with gifts when they're finally all in love and stuff. He showers her with all these gifts, and he basically tries to bribe her to stay. I mean, when she finds out his little secret, and he threatens her. He admits that he could force her to stay. And that's the last thing, but he does restrain himself and realize, no, I can't do that because I love you too much. So he deserves points for that. But he also, like, I don't really like that he, I get that he was trying to make Jane feel jealous, to experience jealous, because she's so young and hasn't had a lot of life. She's never been in love before, has not experienced love in her life, and has not got a lot of love in her life. And he tries to make her experience jealousy. Because, he wants someone to be passionately in love with him to the point of they would be jealous and threatened by another woman. And then, but also, as much as I don't like Blanche and think she's a bitch, I kind of feel bad for her that he was just using her and just messing with her, like getting to her because he was pretending to show interest in her romantically. But really, the longer they were around and the more, at his home, he was kind of, wasn't always nice to her. Nice Blanche. And yeah, the woman is a bitch. she is mean and, rude and just typical, like, that rich person who thinks she's better than everyone else. She looks down on Jane, and they were talking about governesses when they learn who Jane is, and were just so rude about it. And Rochester, of course, does not say anything. And but I still felt bad. Part of me felt a little pity for her, because at the end of the day, it's like she was just being used by him, and and she's probably a woman that's desperate to get a husband, because that's the struggle of all women, even if they're mean, and she still has to deal with it. She still has to find a husband, and we don't know her situation, of course. She seems pretty well, doing pretty good for herself, but we don't know if she was in a position where she had to get a husband, where she had to get married. We don't know how old she is. And he was just flirting with her and pretending to show interest that he was thinking about proposing marriage. And then the whole scene with the gypsy. He tricks everybody and disguises himself as in the book as a gypsy. Now, in the adaptation I just recently watched, the 2005, I think, is when it came out, the one with Toby Stephens, and I already forgot her name. She was in his Dark Materials, the recent adaptation, as Miss what is her name? Colson or Coulter. She played Miss Coulter. But that actress, and she plays Jane, and so in that version, it's not him disguised as the gypsy. It's he actually hires a Romani woman, to mess with people and see if he can get help him mess with everybody and trick them and everything. Well, in the book, he actually disguises himself, and they do in the 1983 adaptation with Timothy Dalton as Rochester. That he does do that. He disguises himself as the Romani the gypsy woman. So it's So another thing he does is not that great. It's a little messed up. It's a little. I mean, it can be seen as funny. It depends. It can be seen as messed up, but it can also be seen as kind of funny. But he was being kind of. Now we don't know. We don't know what was said between him and what he says to Blanche, as what the gypsy woman says to Blanche. We don't know. We just, because of course we're in Jane's head the whole time. It's her perspective. So we aren't privileged to get those conversations. But either way, we're assuming that he tried to steer her away from, mess with her a little bit, and point out that she's probably gonna, maybe even give the impression that she's gonna be unhappy, and that, and like I said, maybe you could make the case that she kind of deserved it, because like I said, she was very mean to, but again, I kind of felt bad for her, and I felt like she didn't, entirely deserve to be tricked. So he does, Rochester does a lot of things that aren't great. But he also is very romantic and passionate. And once he and Jane are together, he showers her with gifts, he spoils her, and he's very loving and romantic. And, and I think Jane probably softens him up a lot when they're together, and he's very caring, affectionate towards her, and he more than is willing, even though Jane is warned by Miss Fairfax that that it's not right for her to flirt with him, and because of the class distinctions and everything, and how she works for him. But he is very devoted to her. Once they're together, he's very loyal and devoted to her, and it's all about Jane and everything. The only difference is then there's the little fact that he's a wife, and that's not great. And he very much respects Jane, I think, and respects her intellectually, and as a woman, and well, although like I said, he manipulates her into experiencing the feelings of jealousy because she's never experienced jealousy, which I don't care. I don't think that's right. Um, and he's of course that Byronic hero, brooding and misunderstood. He was, you can tell he saw these secrets and all these, like, the world has done him wrong, and he is very bitter and angry at the world. But again, he's not as cruel as Heathcliff. He's a little bit better. Um, but he's a very complicated man. He is, he has his good traits. I mean, I still believe he does, I mean, and he's also an interesting man to read about. Like, I think things people are fascinated by reading about these messed up, dysfunctional people. It's so interesting to read about them and to try to get inside their head and understand them. It's like, in the real world, yeah, you shouldn't be with someone like that, but it's fun to read about. And I think that's the thing about, like, it's like people love Wuthering Heights, and I'm one of those people I see who loves Wuthering Heights. I mean, I haven't seen this adaptation yet, but I think it's enjoyable to read about, someone like Heathcliff or Rochester who are so messed up, but they're so fascinating, such fascinating characters, and they're such tragic figures. And, like, it's just, I mean, like, people love reality TV shows, so, and this is like any other drama. I mean, that's why, sometimes we go from, that's also, it's not just about, like, oh, I'm gonna date this bad boy, but I think once as you get older and mature and realize, yeah, I shouldn't date this person would not be a good partner in real life, you're still kind of drawn to those characters. They're just so intriguing to, to watch or read about. And because you want to understand them, but, so Rochester is just, he's really, like he said, he's very complicated, but he's interesting. And he has his bad stuff and he has his good stuff. He has, I mean, a lot of people could make the case that he's more bad traits than good traits. But, I mean, again, you gotta give him props because once he and Jane were together, he was very devoted to her. He was very loyal to her. And he does, and like I said, he does take, in Adele, even though he thinks Adele's not his child, he does take her in and raise her and make sure she gets the education she deserves. And he does intend thinking that he's doing the right thing for Bertha, because it would be a lot worse her. And I don't know, and there might be people who would disagree that, I don't know, but from what I've heard about these places, what I know, and then granted, I don't know a lot about these asylums, so maybe I can't make that grand case of, oh, Bertha was better off. But, like, at least she had one person devoted to her as far as taking care of her goes. And she had hopefully some decent food, although I don't know if she didn't have decent food. I mean, I haven't read Wide Sargasso Sea, so maybe that might shed some light if she had a better life, if her life at Thornfield Hall was better or not than what it would be if she was in an asylum. But at least she gets one-on-one attention. And now I don't know if the attic, although I don't know if the attic is actually a comfortable place for her. But anyway. So yeah, I mean, in his mind, he's doing what's best for her, so who knows? I mean, a lot of people would say that, yeah, the asylum, but I'm still trying to play devil's advocate here and be like, okay, because I don't know a lot about those places. But, I mean, from the little bit I've heard, though, they aren't great, they're horrible. So he has decent intentions with the people in his life. And, like, it sounds like he's a good he's a good employer. I mean, Fairfax, and I think there's one other person working. They don't complain about it. Of course, they can't really. And well, I mean, maybe they could a little bit secretly to each other, but privately, but who knows. Um, yeah, so let's go over. So the good points is he's a good employer, it seems like. He is willingly takes in Adele and raises her and lets Bertha live with him in the attic instead of going to an asylum where she might be ignored and treated worse than she is here because she's got one-on-one and she's, in a nice house, although she's in the attic, so that's not that great. Probably not the most comfortable place. Like, I don't even know if I'm assuming she has a bed. I don't remember if she had a bed or not, but. And he's very passionate, very romantic. He is very devoted to Jane, and he does genuinely love her. Even, yes, he wanted to, like, he knew he had to he was kind of probably trying to take a wife to, but he met someone who he felt a connection with, and they really bonded, and she could keep up with him, and he knew she wasn't like a vain, spoiled little princess like Blanche and other women like her were. So I think that's part of the appeal, and she was his intellectual equal, just as she saw him as her intellectual equal, and they loved each other. They loved each other and were devoted to each other. And even if we think Jane could do better, really, could she really? Because there was only one other option for her in the story, and we don't know if anyone else would show her interest. I mean, she's described as plain, and she's very quiet and reserved, so, we don't know. And she lived, in the moors of England. She hadn't been to the city before, so, I mean, we don't know if anyone else would have shown interest to her, and she wasn't gonna leave. Like, she couldn't afford to go to the city. Until, although she does now, and by the end of the story, she's able to. But she was in love with Rochester, and even though she could do, like I said, so I always respect character, even if I don't always agree with characters' decisions. Well, with Once Upon a Time, that's another story, but in most cases, I try to respect my character's decisions, and, even if I don't agree with it, and it is fun to discuss it. But, and he loved her back for who she was. Not just, and he thought she was beautiful in her own way, and just, that's what we all want. Most women want is we want to be loved for who we are, and have respected and feel safe in our relationship, and she felt that way about Rochester. But then there are all those other traits. There's the fact that he's kind of, even though he takes an Adele, he's kind of an ass to her. Because she reminds him too much of her mom, and he is bitter towards the mom. So yes, he gives her gifts, he gives her a home, make sure she gets all the education, which that kind of goes in the sort of in the good, but sort of in the bad section, because he probably only gives them to her to shut her up. And just which, yeah, if you're not good with kids, and, even though I don't want kids myself, if you're not good with kids, that's not a good, to me, that is a downgrade if you're not good with kids. And he's not. Although we don't know, let me take that back, because we don't know how he will be with his own kids, because we know if you've read the rest of the book, you know that they do have their own kids. I mean, I think that's in the book. I don't know if that maybe they just show that in adaptations to bookend the story, to say, oh, they lived happily ever after and they had a family and everything. And he lies. That's a big flaw, is that he lied about having a wife. And he's very a bitter, angry, temperamental man. And like I said, he didn't make the best first impression with Jane. He was very rude and mean to her, and of course, being a rich gentleman, he's all bitter and entitled and thinks the world owes him. And so he's So he has a lot of good and bad about him. He's just a really interesting character to read about. And I feel like the Brontes write a lot about, so far they've, Charlotte and Emily especially writes about, some interesting characters. Although Emily only has one book and the rest of her work is poetry. Um and I've only read one thing, the one of Anne's books, because she has two books. Charlotte's the one who's written the most. And in fact, Anne probably is the most healthy, in her relation in Agnes Grey, her her couple in Agnes Grey is probably the healthiest couple in all of their works. I mean, I haven't read The Ten of Wildfell Hall yet, but I do have it. And like I said, I'm currently reading Shirley. But yeah, but yeah, the couple, I don't remember them that well, and but the couple in Agnes Grey is the most healthy. And I just saying, it wasn't an all-time favorite book. It was kind of boring compared to Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. And that doesn't mean it's a bad book. It was just, in my opinion, it was kind of boring. That was just for me. And I know a lot of people, like, recently, Caroline Marie Reed's read the book and loves it. I just didn't. I personally just don't love it. But yeah, it's a better example of a good relationship. The one in Agnes Grey. And he's also a man of, I think he was a church man, too. I think he was like a minister or something, so I think. It's been a couple years since I read it, and at least I don't have it anymore because I decided to donate it because, like I said, it kind of bored me a little bit. But yeah, if you're looking for a healthy relationship, that was probably one of the only ones. Like I said, I haven't read Ten of Wildfell Hall, so maybe that one's healthy too. Because it seems like Anne writes some more healthier relationships, probably as far as romance goes. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by reading about Rochester. He's a very I've kept seeing. I saw it when I went yesterday, but I didn't get it because it's a hardback book, and so I try not to get too many hardbacks. I mean, especially because they're gonna be, even though it's really, Outpost is used, so it's really cheap, but it's still, $5 for a hardback, and then it would limit how many books I could buy. But anyway, it's called Mr. Rochester. I can't remember. So it's like very, so I keep seeing that. I would be kind of curious, but then I would be apprehensive to read it. So, if I see it there paperback next time I'm there, I might get it. Just to read it, but who knows? But anyway, but like I said, I would be interested in reading that book to see what that author does with the character. Because he's very complicated, complex. He's a little bit better than Heathcliff, but he has a lot of issues too. And who knows if Jane could ever find anyone else that would love her as much as Rochester does. But, the other thing is that even though he's very devoted and loyal to Jane, there is the issue of he's not aware of the position he could put her in if there was anyone else around or anyone came to visit them. If they knew that she was a governess. I mean, luckily they're not in an environment, they're kind of isolated. And it's just their little bubble. So that probably really helps. So I don't have to worry about anyone judging them. But if they lived in the city and around a lot of people, if they weren't on the moors, then, it would put Jane in a bad position because, of course, it wouldn't look good for someone of her station to go flirting with and pursuing someone like Rochester, a rich gentleman who could change his mind. They talk about that in season 4 of Bridgerton. That plays a part in the romance of season 4 and book 4, or not book 4. It's actually book 2 or book 3. No, yeah, book 3, I think. But anyway, that the whole idea of class station differences and putting, and like women need to be put in their place, and that you need to know your station in life, and that you can't, these two classes cannot merge together in that kind of way. Because she does, and she does get a talking to by Miss Fairfax when she realizes what's going on between the two of them. When she sees them kissing, she warns Jane, and she was like, "I thought you were better than this. I thought you were smarter than this." And and Jane deserves to be loved, and I think if Rochester is gonna love her, then good for her. But I don't think once they're together, and she's taking care of him and everything, and she can put up with his BS, then as a reader and fan of the story, I'm happy for them, even, and yes, the character is a jerk at times and does not, and but like I said, there's no other option. What other options are there for Jane? And this was written a long time ago, like in the 1800s. So, and it's a gothic novel. That's another thing. So it's like that. Those characters, that's what they write. The Byronic hero, and he's a Byronic hero. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about Rochester as a character. I would be kind of intrigued by your responses because I know a lot of people take issue with Rochester as a character and maybe even think he's abusive. I don't know. I'd be curious. I would be apprehensive though because, like I said, I'm acknowledged that I'm not trying to defend the character in the I'm trying to put all sides, talk about the character, the whole around, like the character, all sides of the character. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this character discussion, and I will talk to y'all later. All right, bye.